So that's the basic idea of taking a group of companies that otherwise don't have convenient access and low-cost access to capital and liquidity in the equation, and giving everybody in the equation the ability to achieve that liquidity and get lower cost of capital for the companies, et cetera. Well, as part of my, after I developed this idea, obviously the question is, well, how sound is it? If I'm talking about it being able to be applied in a kind of a universal sense, does it work? Do the assumptions that I'm making here, prove out in reality? So I started exploring this idea, talking with various folks, and I wound up having discussions with two separate major law firms. Each had encountered this concept themselves, not in this generic sense, but as a result of specific clients that they had that had a need, and they had come up with this solution to their particular need, and had applied it there, but just simply hadn't looked at it as a more universal solution set. They looked at it specifically for their individual circumstances. And to give you the particulars of it, that the first one was done by a major law firm out of the Los Angeles area that had a client approach them with this idea, and what they wound up doing, of all things, is they wanted to put together a public company that owned a ton of mom-and-pop laundromats. So what they did is they developed this structure of creating a holding company, and it went out and pulled in a whole lot of small mom-and-pop laundromats out there, took that whole group and took it public, and the attorney that I was talking to said it worked like a champ, and that everybody was involved with it made a ton of money off of it. So that it validated the increase in value concept that I had talked about, as well as it validated the fact that they were able to get lower cost of capital so they could grow the thing and so on, and the liquidity concept. So all the participants in it were able to realize liquidity, whereas with a small mom and pause, the only way they could is they'd have to sell it to somebody else. So this way everybody did realize that. That was the first instance. The second one was a Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area law firm that had a number of firms in the San Francisco Bay Area that he didn't explain why they decided, but they decided to band together, and they put it together under a holding company and took the holding company public. He said the holding company maintained a relatively low profile. There wasn't, like if you call the first company that was part of this group ABC Company, everybody in the world that dealt with ABC Company continued to deal with ABC Company. That, as far as the identity of that particular company and that small business that went into this, they maintained their identity. But they became part of this larger group. And so all of these shareholders, investors, and so on there were able to achieve the liquidity, but their customer base and the rest of the world knew them as that. And just like with this other laundromat one, that the concept worked like a champ. So it validated the liquidity question, the access to capital, and so on. But it was originally done with very specific purposes in mind for those individual companies. And again, not really thinking that this solution set has more universal potential application. So that's certainly reinforced to me that both of those attorneys said, your idea is sound. We've had the experience, it works. So that's why I am very confident this is a concept that can work. And I've just looked at it differently from the standpoint of saying, well, this has some potential universal application, so what could we do about it? Having validated the idea, having developed it, and then looking at the different elements that go into that, if we're going to set up a holding company, where would it be? Where would we take it public, etc.? After we addressed all those questions, we came to the conclusion that this was a very viable business concept that is quite easy to put together. The big caveat, more than anything else, that just about everybody agrees is the potential difficulty of taking disparate companies that haven't had any association together before, and in particular taking the CEOs of those and bringing them together as a cooperative group. So much depends upon the personality of the CEO in that circumstance. Can they work in a group instead of having to be king of the hill? And so that's, as some people describe it, it's like trying to herd cats. That that is our single biggest problem, is finding the right mix of companies, which we're just now in the process of starting to do. There's the interesting thing about this is that it creates a concept that's applicable in many different ways. The ideal is you want to bring together what I'll call an affinity group. For example, an affinity group might be a number of alternative energy companies. So there's an affinity between the different kinds of companies who all kind of complement each other in what they're doing, and it would attract a particular type of investment community, both customer group and an investor community. So we concluded this idea was a very universal one. What we're now doing is that we're working on putting together the model for our first such one, to prove out the whole concept to everybody. And our personal preference is to aggregate a group of companies that are in one form or another oriented to dealing with issues that are environmental or social issues or clean technology concepts, alternative energy, that a lot of people tend to summarize as sustainability or triple bottom line oriented companies. So that's our affinity group concept that we'd like to put together, and that we've laid the foundation for where we're going to establish the holding company and where we're going to be able to take it public. And so now we're starting to talk with the various companies out there that would fit this particular affinity group model. And once we've done this, that we're looking at taking this as a prototype for how do you do this, and applying it over and over again. So the concepts again are so universal that there's widespread application. And as an entrepreneur who spent an awful lot of time building and running small companies, I intimately understand the problems that are encountered by the entrepreneur who's trying to run small and medium-sized enterprises, and especially if they have to deal with the investor community, raising funds to be able to grow the idea and get to the point of cash flow positive and so on. That just what difficulties this translates to, and I can see how universal this solution set can be for literally many, many, many small and medium-sized businesses out there, giving them a solution set they don't have on the table today. And thus, when you consider that small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, are really the main engine to the growth of our economy, whether here or really anywhere in the world, that more jobs are created in small and medium-sized businesses than are created in the big companies. So even though the big companies wield an awful lot of enormous, economic power and so on, they're really not good engines for new job creation. Small companies are, but small companies struggle with this very problem, and thus we now can put on the table a solution set for those small and medium-sized businesses that has very widespread application.